What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, opinions, and so forth. So let's get right on into it. Obviously, this is Memorial Day weekend. The observations have already started earlier today. Trump was out at Arlington going through one of the observances, and I think especially this Memorial Day, they're going to be laying it on real thick about how glorious and great war is. I know that the cable TV box is loaded up with all these war movies that are going to glorify war and how we won World War II all by ourselves, which of course is a big lie. And but Trump is already finding himself in this terrible controversy. And it actually started before the Memorial Day weekend. And it goes back to 2008 near the town of Baiji in Iraq. First Lieutenant Michael Behena of the U.S. Army murdered a prisoner. That is a war crime. And that was the verdict of the jury in his 2009 court-martial. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but paroled in less than 5. And on May of this year, Donald Trump issued him a pardon. So apparently, Trump is planning to celebrate Memorial Day by pardoning several other Americans convicted of or accused of and not yet tried for war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And one of the individuals has admitted, he did what he's accused of. And this is a horrible, horrible idea. One reason is it is insane to excuse the commission of crimes, especially violent ones, for no other reason than the criminal is a government employee. And the second is it's bad for the morale and discipline of the U.S. Armed Forces to excuse violations of international law by the service people. This is a bad idea, and I don't know where Trump got this, and I don't know what he's thinking. But even Pentagon officials are saying this is a bad idea. Okay, so citing the ongoing tensions with Iran, CENTCOM is requesting the Pentagon approve 10,000 U.S. troops to the Middle East to be deployed somewhere around there. And the emphasis on somewhere has to do with the fact that Iraq is probably not going to welcome them into their territory. In fact, Iraq is getting ready to ask the United States to leave, and that's going to create a bit of a conflict over there as well. So they're stating these troops will be purely defensive. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. But it is clear that the forces are directed against Iran. Now, when Secretary of State Mike Pompeo testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he made the claim that there's no doubt that there is a connection between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Al-Qaeda, full stop, end quote. Well, we heard that in the run-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Oh, Saddam is helping Al-Qaeda. Saddam is in cahoots with Al-Qaeda. And of course, the reality was that Al-Qaeda and Saddam were enemies for no other reason than Al-Qaeda purports at least to be a theocracy, and Saddam had a secular government. So basically, Pentagon and State Department officials are saying Pompeo's statements are way out of proportion, and there is nothing in the intelligence to suggest any cooperation between Iran and Al-Qaeda in some grand anti-American alliance. And especially if you remember that Al-Qaeda is actually a U.S. proxy, of course they're not going to be working together with Iran. And that's why there is no evidence of it in the intelligence. But Pompeo's just going to get out there and say whatever he thinks he needs to say to get you, the American suckers, I mean you, the American taxpayer, to go along with yet another war. But it does look like it's coming, unfortunately. And over at the New York Times, we're seeing a repeat performance of the propaganda run-up to the war on Iraq. Iraq's got weapons of mass destruction. They've got nukes, they've got germs, they've got chemicals, all of which pretty much turned out to be false because Iraq, in compliance with the United Nations, had surrendered all of that stuff. But now they're doing it again, and the New York Times is out there screaming that Iran is getting ready to accelerate its nuclear weapons program, forgetting that Iran never had a nuclear weapons program. In fact, when they first started this propaganda war against Iran, the claim wasn't that Iran had nuclear weapons, it's that they were going to build them at some point in the future, and this was justification for an attack on that country. But the New York Times is already out there trying to sell the idea Iran has nuclear weapons, they're going to build more of them, we should all be afraid, and salute the flag and fling our money and our children onto the Iranian bayonets. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. You need to remember, Congress has never authorized a U.S. war on Iran. And under the U.S. Constitution, Congress has sole authority to do that. Now, the problem goes back to this 2001 war authorization, the authorization for the use of military force, which was supposedly passed just to deal with Iraq. But unfortunately, ever since then, the authorization for the use of military force has been cited as permission for the president to launch conflict 41 times in 18 countries. So Senators Chris Murphy and Tom Udall led an effort on Wednesday to try and reassert congressional authority over war making. They brought their proposal before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It unfortunately immediately failed, 13-9. But Murphy is saying the vote was intended to remind the administration they don't have the authorization for the war. Unfortunately, with Pompeo and Bolton around there, I don't think they really care. Now, the story is a little different over at the House Appropriations Committee because they've approved an amendment to the annual defense spending bill that would end the authorization for the use of military force bill and restore authorization for warfighting to the Congress where it truly belongs. The founding fathers of this country understood you could not have a central leader executive able to just whip our military onto anybody he didn't like, because that's how empires and tyrannies and dictatorships began. But it's starting to get a little bit tense on both sides, and over in Iran, Rouhani has said he is now seeking expanded wartime executive powers to better deal with the economic war triggered by the Trump administration's pullout from the P5+1 nuclear deal and escalating U.S. sanctions. And Rouhani apparently, in an interview with IRNA, cited the 1980s war with Iraq, when a wartime Supreme Council was able to bypass other branches to make the decisions regarding the economy and the war. So it's not clear exactly what new powers Rouhani is asking for, but it is getting very serious when everybody starts talking about, I have to have special executive powers. So over in Iraq, there's this United Nations team, and it's investigating the massacre of Yazidis and other atrocities. So far, they have unearthed 12 mass graves in Iraq. And apparently, the team sent a report to the Security Council, said efforts were focused on 3 initial investigations. The 2014 massacre of Yazidis, crimes committed in Mosul from 2014 to 2016, and the mass killing of Iraqi military recruits in the Tikrit area in June of 2014. All of these committed by ISIS. Now, the Security Council agreed in 2017 to establish this probe to ensure that ISIS faces justice for war crimes in Iraq and Syria. I am quite frankly surprised that the UN didn't veto that, but on the other hand, it would have been tipping the hand that ISIS is a U.S. Proxy. But bad things happen in war, and as the war gets worse, worse things will happen. Over in Syria, a little bit of a setback for the Syrian Arab Army. The militants have started a large-scale advance on army positions. As we reported yesterday, they have heavy artillery. Apparently today they launched 17 rockets that was 2 days ago when they attacked the Russian air base. 8 rockets did not reach the base, 9 were intercepted. On the evening of May 22nd, a squadron of armed unmanned aerial vehicles attacked Hama's air base. And apparently all of the UAVs were intercepted. The air base sustained no damage. But at least one UAV attacked the Zara'a power plant in southern Hama, causing extensive damage to the plant's equipment. So apparently this new wave of UAV attacks took place amid fierce fighting in northwestern Hama, where the Syrian Arab Army has lost the initiative and they are now apparently on the defensive. Not a good thing to be on. Okay, not too long ago, there was this leaked engineering assessment from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons into the alleged chemical attack in Douma. And it's important to understand, the official OPCW report said that yes, it was a chemical attack. Their own engineers said no, it was staged. So you can see how politicized OPCW has become in all of this. And as this all percolates all over the internet and the independent media, what does the United States do? They come on out and say, oh, forget about Douma. We're seeing more chemical attacks now, today, just pay attention to those. Fool me once, shame on you, so forth and so on. I mean, it's just one lie after another, one false flag after another, just to push this idea of more war. Over in Yemen, Yemeni forces are warning of more retaliatory strikes as the Saudi war continues to claim civilian lives. I wish they'd stop calling it the Saudi war. This is another U.S. war using Saudi Arabia and the UAE as proxies. And apparently Saudi Arabia is now issuing allegations about Yemen's plan to attack holy sites. Yemen is dismissing these as big lies, saying no, they have as much respect for the holy sites as everybody else. Now, last year in July, there was an attack by Yemen on the Abu Dhabi airport. And Abu Dhabi denied it happened. The United Arab Emirates said, no, it didn't happen. Well, today, the Yemeni forces have released footage from the drone that carried out the strike. And apparently, it shows a Samad-3 unmanned aerial vehicle flying at low altitude before it fires a missile, setting 2 trucks parked at the airport ablaze. Not a lot of damage, but it is symbolic that it could be done. Think Doolittle's raiders on Tokyo. It wasn't how much damage they caused, it was that they were able to do it at all. Over in Libya, that place is in a mess. You need to remember back when Muammar Gaddafi was still running the place, it was calm, it was peaceful, they had prosperity, they had literacy, they had water, they had that new aqueduct system, they had a growing economy. And then, because Gaddafi wanted to sell Libya's oil for the gold dinar, nation-state actors went on in, they killed Gaddafi, they reimposed a private central bank on Libya, and it's fallen apart with these various warlords, competing factions. And the United Nations envoy is saying that Libya is on the verge of a full-blown civil war. And this is a reminder of what happens to countries that suffer U.S. interventions. Life after the intervention is never, ever, ever better for the people. It's never even as good as it was before. Everything's been shot up or bombed. The people are going hungry. There's illness. Infrastructure's destroyed. Now, a little bit of good news here. Over in Ukraine, The State Investigation Bureau has opened a criminal case against former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko over the Kerch Strait incident. And it's a high treason case. And it's basically, the accusations are that Poroshenko's actions were aimed at deliberately provoking the Russian Federation for retaliatory and easily foreseen aggressive actions in a tense situation, which caused losses in the inventory of the Ukrainian Navy. So good. I hope I hope they do a real number on him. And I got to be very honest, if anybody from Russia is listening to this broadcast, I think it might really be a good idea to return those ships and those crewmen and ease that tension right there. I mean, you've got an incoming president who wants to renew relations with Russia. And this would be a good first step. It would be a symbolic gesture to let those seamen come home with their boats, with their ships, and sort of wind that whole thing down. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump has admitted in an interview with Fox News' Steve Hilton that the United States carried out a cyber attack against Russia last year. And there's a video of it, which is linked to whatreallyhappened.com. And Trump said the cyber attack happened during my administration. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. Not too long ago, the United States, I can't remember if it was the Congress who did this or Trump just signed an executive order declaring that a cyber attack on our country would be seen as an outright act of war. So for Trump to make that admission on Fox News, he's basically opening up the door for Russia to say the United States has committed an act of war against Russia. They are the aggressors. But aggression does seem to be very much out there. Now, there is this company, it's called the Rand Corporation. It is the most influential think tank in the USA. I had some contact with them when I was all the way back with NASA JPL, because they do a lot of work for a lot of areas. But apparently, they are working on how to destroy Russia. And the Rand Corporation prides itself on having contributed to the elaboration of the long-term strategy which enabled the United States to win the Cold War by forcing the Soviet Union to consume its own economic resources in the strategic confrontation. This was when Reagan came up with the Strategic Defense Initiative. They spent a huge amount of money. In fact, they almost bankrupted this country in it and didn't really produce much that was all that useful. But it did spook the Soviet Union into basically spending huge amounts of money on their military to counter the perceived threat, which ultimately led to its collapse. And they're saying it's time to do the same thing to the Russian republics. I don't know if the Russian republics will fall for it. First of all, because they know they got swindled before. Second, I mean, Putin just actually pulled back on their defense budget. And by the way, speaking of fooling the Soviet Union, back at the height of the Cold War, there was this leaked communique reporting that the U.S. military had carried out a successful ESP experiment between a laboratory in California and a submerged submarine up by Alaska, proving that they could get telepathic communication to work. Of course, it was all a lie. And this document was leaked out where it was known that Soviet agents would see it. And it tricked the Soviet Union into spending a huge amount of money trying to develop psychic weaponry. So this kind of stuff does happen an awful lot. China is out there saying that the United States is starting to resemble Don Quixote in seeing that everybody around or everything around is a threat, and reminding them that of the fictional character Don Quixote, his misplaced determination and fears leads him on all of these doomed endeavors. And they comment that the U.S. keeps saying other countries make it feel unsafe. That is baffling. It really is. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go to the phones to Layla in Canada. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. The subject of treason is on my mind. You just referred to Poroshenko being charged with high treason for
Yes.
presumably provoking other nations into a war, into potential wars.
Yes.
When the caller yesterday, I did not respond when Nathan called because I thought he was a little hysterical. And whereas the gentleman from Michigan was more respectful, and I regret I did not respond to him as respectfully as I wish I had. But nonetheless, I've thought about the concept of treason, and just to why I may have used the word treason with regard to Trump's behavior while in office. He has put the interests of Israel ahead of the nation, the republic. And if you look at the oath of inauguration, it states, or he's supposed to have said, I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the president and, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So really treason in that sense. Now, you said that it's only used within with regard to wars.
That's the legal definition of treason, is aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war.
Yes, but that is only in the legal sense, in the Constitution as well as the federal law, when somebody is being charged and prosecuted for treason. However, treason does exist in normal everyday language and is synonymous with a breach of allegiance, a betrayal of allegiance. And that's where I was using the word treason.
Okay.
Because one of the duties, the greatest responsibility of a president is not only to defend and preserve the Constitution, but to defend and preserve the legitimate citizens of the country, those who have earned their citizenship by the ways that were outlined over generations of the existence of the Republic of the United States. And Trump's failure to fulfill his major promises to the people, the promises that got him elected, is where I feel that he has betrayed and failed to uphold the allegiance that he owes to the people and to the Republic. And
in that context, I agree with you.
Yeah. By the way, the concept, the treason clause originated, ironically, with Edward III, way back in the 14th century, where even thinking anything that violated the wishes of the monarch was considered treason. And that was used in a more narrow sense by the fathers of Confederation when they were writing the Constitution. But the other thing that the caller, that I was rather surprised by his emotionalism, he said that Trump had no foreign interests, no foreign businesses. Well, that's not true.
No, that's definitely not true.
Yeah, the Washington Post, which is owned by Jared Kushner, lists a number of countries where the Trump organization did conduct business. And furthermore, there are 12 different countries where Trump used to outsource his product, his production.
Okay, Layla, I got to back you up on this. The Washington Post is not owned by Jared Kushner. It's owned by Jeff Bezos.
I know that Kushner does own. Does own a portion of the Washington Post, and that was on the Washington Post website itself. How much of it he owns, I do not know. But a lot of his holdings are very vague, as are the Trump holdings. And this is where it's very difficult to say exactly what Trump's outsourcing has done. But the greatest thing that Trump has failed to do is to live up to the most important promises that he offered during his campaign. and that is to ensure that the people of the United States, the citizens, the taxpayers, were provided with jobs and decent housing. Instead, we hear about the piles of garbage in L.A.,
Yes.
while the mayor of L.A. is off in Israel, leading a delegation of mayors to a conference in Israel. And Trump is busy declaring that the status of Jerusalem while ignoring the status of the southern border.
Yes.
That, to me, is a breach, a failure of allegiance to his duty. And look at the oath of allegiance.
Okay, Layla?
You know, that
Layla? Okay, we have to take a break for commercials. I'm going to hold you over. Do not hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Layla in Canada, and we're talking about how, frankly, Donald Trump has shown that he is not really complying with his oath of office. He certainly doesn't seem to be defending the Constitution or protecting the Constitution. He does seem to be more loyal to a foreign power. The reason I hesitate to use the word treason is because it gets used a little too much. So it's certainly a breach of faith, a breach of trust with the American people. He, broke his promises. But I think the reason some people objected to that word is because it does get used so much against so many people. Now, in the case of Poroshenko over in Ukraine, I don't know what their laws are, but it looks to me like it was the loss of the 3 ships to a regional rival that was the basis for the treason charge.
Well, the thing is that treason is really just, it's not a patented word that can only be used within the legal context of the Constitution or the federal legal code. It is also part of the vernacular. So it is a word that is synonymous with failure to fulfill your duties of allegiance. But in the case of the president, it is more than simply a matter of allegiance to the flag or allegiance to the nation, and that is supposed to be, quote, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, this being the legitimate citizens of the United States that built it.
Yes.
It's in that sense, considering the higher standard that is applied to someone, because there's also something called the misprision, misprision of treason.
Yes.
Where when a person who is complicit becomes complicit in treason, if they are aware of treason and do not report it to, guess who? The president. So the president is the ultimate person to whom the responsibility falls to uphold the standards of the republic and the criteria that is outlined within the Constitution. And yet he seems to be, there are only supposed to be 2 eyewitnesses to treason. I think we have a nation, millions of people, who are witnesses to the fact that Trump has failed to live up to his oath, which he swore on a Bible. And one of the comments was that Trump is supposedly a Christian. Well,
Yes.
if you are, when you swear on the Bible, then you take your oath even more seriously. So those are the reasons that I used the word treason. And I used it in an all-encompassing, non-legal term, meaning that it is a failure to uphold the Pledge of Allegiance, not only to the flag, to the Republic, and to his oath at inauguration, and to all of the responsibilities inherent within the office of the United States President. However, Nathan also forgot to, or ignores the fact that I have called out someone like Rashida Tlaib, who is an elected official and whom I believe should have her citizenship revoked on the basis that she called not Trump, but she denigrated the office of the President of the United States when she used that foul language. And yet she gets away with it. And even many of the Democrats...
Yeah, but it could be argued that's covered by the First Amendment.
I don't. It could be argued. It could be argued, but I don't think the First Amendment would. When you would have to weigh the First Amendment versus the obligation to hold the office of the president in higher esteem. Now, if Trump fails to hold the office of the presidency in high esteem, then someone like Rashida Tlaib can get away with it. And it is up to her constituents to throw her out. And this is another word that Nathan accused me of using, overthrow the president. I may have used that word, I do not recall it, but I wish he had given a date and a verbatim quote and used it within context. I have always been opposed to violence because then we lose control of the outcome. And the more violent and the more sadistic people tend to win out in a war.
Yes.
In any kind, when you talk about any kind of violent chaos. If I did use the word overthrow, I meant at the ballot box in the next election. So it seems only fair that when a caller calls in and makes their point, they should be, their words should not be distorted or misrepresented by another caller. It is a disservice to you. It is a disservice to the trust that a caller places on other listeners not to distort their words. And if they call in, they should have their own arguments to make and not simply to try to defame someone else, because there are people around me who can identify who I am. So it verges on defamation to distort and denigrate someone's comments and put them in a negative light. However, there are plenty of witnesses to the things that I have said, and I'm not the only one who has complained about Trump's failure to live up to his promises and to his oath. So I think I've said enough for today. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, and thank you for clarifying that all up here again. And I have to be very honest, I don't recall you using the word overthrow. So it may have been that somebody sort of projected onto that. Anyway, Layla, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Lou in California. Aloha, Lou. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, guten Abend. Wie geht's
Guten Abend. Wie geht's es Ihnen?
How you been?
So what's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. Let me see. Let me get this straight. Okay, so we're still worried about Iran. We're still worried about Russia. We're doing cyber attacks. We're still, worried about all that stuff in the Middle East, thinking we're going to win over there. And last time I checked, we have this national security emergency on the border here on the southern border. We got caravan after caravan coming and stuff. The border patrol, is just having such a very almost nearly impossible time doing their job and stuff. And we're patrolling. We're still got our military in Afghanistan and Ukraine and Poland.
We don't have, I don't know how much of our military is in Ukraine, other than supposedly some advisors. We're not in Ukraine in force.
Or where is our military in force that you know of more or less there, Mike? Is our military in the Baltic nations or in Poland or?
Well, it's hard to say because the military is kind of keeping that under wraps. I mean,
right.
We're talking about conflicts in 18 different nations that we have been told of. Bernie Sanders came out a while back and said, we've got U.S. military personnel basically in 3/4 of the nations on planet Earth.
Yeah, and so, we've got all these caravans coming, that are, and then let's see, and at the border right now, at all the border stations and everything, are there all these people from not just Central America, but from around the world,
Yep.
that have been bamboozled, about welfare and benefits and goodies and stuff over here. Is that what's, and then I don't know, is there some justice that can be done to those people that are going down to Central America to try to round everybody up down there to get on a caravan and come up over here?
Well, yeah. I mean, somebody is organizing these caravans to basically bring these people from Central America and Mexico up to our border and just pour them across the fence. And if you think about it from a particular point of view, and one of our callers yesterday made this point, it's a form of asymmetric warfare. We are being slow motion invaded by an army that we're told we can't defend ourselves against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, maybe it's too good of an idea. So why don't we just bring home our, maybe 2/3 of our military that's in Afghanistan and maybe in Germany and in Iraq and Syria, and put them on the border to help out border patrol, to try to stem this flow of humanity, that we just can't, really realistically take care of and stuff, Our economy is not really in a strong position, to absorb all these people. A lot of people unemployed, stuff,
Oh yeah, the economy's in terrible, terrible shape. If you're looking at being in a wartime economy, it's just not working.
Yeah, because I'll give you a little example and stuff. As far as bringing manufacturing jobs back over here and stuff. I wonder if, you go to Sears. Just about everything in Sears is made in China now. Sears,
yes,
yeah, excellent place to go shopping and stuff. It's a miserable place now.
Yes.
Sorry, Sears employees. And Amazon, how much stuff in their inventory is made here versus made in, say, China or India and stuff, You know what I mean?
A lot of it's made in China here. And again, this goes back to the 1980s, where we had a new generation of corporate CEOs who had grown out of the MBAs of the post-World War II era and said, we don't need to get our hands dirty manufacturing. We'll let Asia do it for us, and we'll make more money that way. Not realizing that further on down the road, we would then be hopelessly dependent on those Asian manufacturers. And that's kind of where we are today. And our manufacturing has been declining steadily, going back 30 years, going back to the 1980s. And we're not going to get it back quickly without some kind of an impetus. But to attempt to use a trade war to reassert American manufacturing at a time when we're going into a recession and the American people don't have any money to spend in the stores anyway was extraordinarily foolhardy.
Oh, yeah. So, Mike, hopefully somebody in Washington will come around, and realize that maybe we could use some of our military that's out in the Middle East or in Europe and stuff like that, bring them home, and put them on the border to assist and stuff, because I think it's treachery, just to not help out, those border patrol agents that are, trying to, process all that humanity and stuff, And
oh, it's
for those
insane.
that have worked hard, to try to, that want to live in this country and stuff like that, it's made it even harder for them,
Yep. All right. Well, Lou, I think we can all sit around here and say that we would much rather see the resources of this nation focused in different directions. Certainly a lot less for Israel because they don't really need it. They just like it. Shutting down some of these bases around the world that are costing so much, bringing the resources back to rebuild our nation. Now, when I was hearing Donald Trump campaign, I thought what he meant by "Make America Great Again" was to restore our infrastructure, our highways, our manufacturing, not to make America great again by going out and making the rest of the world inferior through bombs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right now I kind of blame it on at least two people, Mr. Bolton, who I don't think ever was in the military, and Mr. Pompeo,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think should know better, So, hopefully something will change because Mr. Trump has a year, for, he can hope to get reelected,
Yep.
Make something of his campaign promises, come to fruition. So, well, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we're going to start with Keith in Montana. And Keith, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Just a couple of things there, Mike. Hope you and Claire are doing fine, by the way. One, I wanted to say something about terrorism, but I'll get that right at the end there. But, when you look at, to me, the way I see things, it's like your neighbor's son that gets mixed up in the wrong crowd and goes out and either robs a liquor store and gets shot up or imprisoned for acting as aiding and abetting, whether he drove the car or what like that. And the community is supposed to get together and hail that poor boy as a hero. Well, I always apply that to the same thing with the military. These boys are getting involved in all these conflicts where no one's a threat to this country. Remember, it's a nuclear power there. And we know from the U.S. aggression there that they have been the ones that are instigating these wars.
Yes.
So when these boys come home shot up or dead like that in body bags like that, I feel no sorry for, sorrow for. I'm sorry, because everyone has a right to disobey an unlawful order.
Well, that's the theory, but as we learned with Lieutenant Aaron Watada, if you actually try and disobey an illegal order, bad things will happen to you.
Well, I realize it, but that's the consequences of a man having a conscience. You mentioned earlier that soldier there that was being released there pardoned for war crimes. Pompeo made a remark about that, calling him a hero this morning on CBS radio news this morning. But
that's pretty
sick.
sick.
The same thing with Trump talking about a great military, great police, the ones that are out there shooting 1,000 Americans a year like that, killing a dog every 93 minutes. So, these are all hailed as heroes, and they all get exonerated from their crimes. But anyway, the other thing, I was watching a YouTube video here a while back there, and it showed over there in the nether regions a farmer that was using a drone, which was applying chemicals to his fields, and it's all pre-programmed and stuff. And I thought to myself, it'd be so much easier for a terrorist to just grab one of those drones and use that. If they've got like a 25-minute fly time like that, they're pre-programmed. You can have them do whatever you want. And lo and behold, here in the news, they're talking about terrorists now using drones for the application of chemicals. It's just...
Well, it is rather an obvious thing. I mean, they were talking about Saddam's drones were being made to disperse biological warfare agents, and then we actually got to see the drones, and they were little more than RC model airplanes. But it's certainly an idea that has been floating around for as long as drones have, and it is a real problem, and it's a real risk, and it's another reason why we should not be pushing these wars.
Yeah, that's right. And then... what is it that, I'm trying to think of the name, Foreign Policy. It has the article on there how the CIA supplied all the chemical weapons to Saddam. And of course, Saddam was,
it
even
did.
Noam Chomsky,
All right, Keith, stay on the line.
All right, no, I'll let you go. But anyway, thank you. My best.
All right, well then we're going to take a break for commercials, back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. And I guess after we move, I'm going to have to learn a new phrase here. It's going to be rather silly to say Aloha America from the wilds of the Heartland. Anyway, before we go back to the phones here, just got an email here saying that Jared Kushner previously owned and ruined the New York Observer, not the New York Times. So let's go back to the phones to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, first of all, that person is correct. Jared Kushner has no interest in at least financial interest in the Washington Post.
Yeah.
The other thing, to answer your question regarding what Trump is going to do on Monday as far as pardoning these war criminals, it was Sean Hannity and another Fox News anchor that persuaded him to do that.
Trump is the president. He should not be allowing media talking heads to talk him into something. They set him up. They basically set him up.
Yeah, and these two guys that persuaded him, they have never been in the military. Never.
No, this has nothing to do with the military, and it's got nothing to do with the wars. They were setting Trump up to draw criticism for doing that.
But why would they? Why would they do that if they're supposed to be a big fan of Trump's?
Well, maybe they were given that suggestion by one of their higher ups, and they weren't thinking either. But it's a bad move on the part of Trump. And it makes it look even worse that it wasn't something that he was thinking about himself, but just a suggestion from some media people. Now, normally I like Sean Hannity, but that was a bad idea. To suggest pardons for, accused and convicted war criminals.
Right. Well, Michael, I'm going to let you go. You take care.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. I mean, if Trump wants to do a pardon, Leonard Peltier, who pretty much everybody who's looked at the case understands, he got framed and railroaded into prison. Mumia al-Jabbar, same thing. There's a lot of people out there who deserve pardons way ahead of military personnel who basically violated international law and the Geneva Convention, and even admit openly doing it. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Miles in Maine, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oy vey, Michael. I'm so disappointed in you.
Oh, really? Why is that?
We live in the freest country in the world. And of course, it's the greatest country in the world because we've been told it is. And it's great when we just appoint the new anti-Semite czar, and he said he's going to visit every one of those nations we got a base at and make sure there's not so much as a textbook with a word of anti-Semitism.
Yep. I mean, it really is absurd to see it all happening.
Yeah, it sounds like another big bath for the taxpayer.
Oh, everything's a big bath for the taxpayer. In fact, one of the 2020 Democratic candidates is already out there saying, well, yes, if I become president, taxes are going to go up. But think of all the good free things that are going to come out of that tax money, like free education for the illegal immigrants and free housing for the illegal immigrants and more bombs to drop on other countries. Somehow, I don't think he's going to make it through primary season.
Well, Mike, thanks for being out there. And everybody remember, we need to contribute to RBN to keep it going.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words and the endorsement here. And we've got to take a break for station identification. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phone here to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to comment on, I believe that was Keith a little while ago, where
yes.
He was talking about refusing. Now, speaking as a vet, someone who actually knew what was going on, as far as like what our duties were, there is this thing called the Law of Armed Conflict, LAC. And in it, it says that as a member of the United States military, you are required, it is your duty to step up and voice your opposition to illegal and unlawful orders. And what this means is anything that would be illegal or unlawful for a civilian to do is illegal for you to do as a soldier as well. This is your duty. You are obligated to step up and refuse to follow through on unlawful and unconstitutional orders. That is your duty. That's an obligation that you take when you join the military. Now, I don't know if maybe they're not teaching that anymore. But when I was in 1980, that was one of the first things you learned, was you never, ever, ever follow through on an order that would normally be illegal or unlawful or unconstitutional. And there was no questions about it.
Well, I don't know if they're teaching that today or not. Apparently, Lieutenant Aaron Watada, as I mentioned, understood that. All of this, of course, came out of the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II, where the prisoners were all out there mounting what was called the Nuremberg defense, which was that they were only following their orders. And it came out of the Nuremberg tribunals that soldiers had to have the right to refuse an illegal order or a cruel order, and so it was written to the the Uniform Code of Military Justice, along with that law that you just mentioned, and they went ahead and hanged most of those Nazis anyway.
Yeah, and that's why today I was just following orders thing, that doesn't fly. They don't accept that as a defense anymore because of that. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because people really need to understand that just because you're in the military doesn't give you license to just kill indiscriminately or just commit atrocities against another man. It doesn't happen. It's not supposed. Well, it does happen, but it's not supposed to happen.
Well, it's
Anyway,
not supposed to happen, but then if you think about what basic training is all about, which is to take, somebody who for the first 18 years of their life has been raised to be a moral, ethical, integral part of society, and then in 6 to 8 weeks, however long basic training is, you teach them how to kill. And, it can crack some people's minds. And I think Stanley Kubrick captured that rather well in Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, and you have a great one, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Linda in Ohio. Aloha, Linda. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I live in Lorain, Ohio. It's about 12 miles away from Oberlin, Ohio. Oberlin, Ohio is a sanctuary city. It also has a sanctuary college campus.
Really?
And, yeah, I didn't know that. I started looking things up after I found out that we were, Lorain, a sanctuary city. Nobody told me about that. I mean, who gives someone, probably the mayor, I would think, authority to do something like that without even, nobody seems to know around here who did it. And the mayor is resigning on the 31st of this month to go to Chicago, a suburb of Chicago. So, how does this happen? And if anybody lives in a sanctuary city, really, what does that mean?
Well, the sanctuary cities, sanctuary counties, sanctuary states basically say that the local authorities will not cooperate with the federal immigration enforcement. All of which is a Title VIII violation, by the way, and it's led to things like these MS-13 gang members were released even though there was an ICE detainer on them, and they went out and they murdered this 14-year-old girl. And so the city is out there trying to say, well, we were justified in releasing them because this is a sanctuary, blah, 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 blah. And again, it's part of the hijacking of our country to be part of this, one world government, new world order. And it's not really working out all that well.
Well, how do I find out who made this decision?
You're going to have to talk to some of your local resources there in Ohio, maybe do some web searches and see if you can find it on out. If it was done by just declaration or some council, legislative body voted it through. But this whole sanctuary nonsense is really exacerbating an already out of control problem.
Okay, so that's what I need to do. And then what do I say when I find out who?
Well, you can call back into the show. You can talk it up with your friends and neighbors and say, this was done without our permission. And you might want to start collecting information on how the influx of migrants into your community has caused problems.
Okay. I'm not aware of any at this time, but just wanted to, get a heads up on it. Okay, well, I'll be calling you back again. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. Back to the phones to Tom in Philadelphia. Tom, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm sorry I'm calling about the woman that you were talking to. I think she was from Canada.
Layla.
Layla. Okay, was she the one that was on your show? I know it's probably not going to remember, but 2 nights ago, the last caller was a woman, and all she did was kept calling us a democracy. And is that the same woman that was?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, because I was surprised that you didn't, throttle her right there. But the other thing I got to talk about is everybody. I could hear everybody saying, "Hey, we got to help for public broadcasters. We got to help." And your commercials are great. If anybody wants to help, we have a bunch of people doing this now, but if they go to the RBN website, they go right below the main ad for the story ad. Right below there is a window for I want free power. Okay, anybody from Maine to Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Texas, California, even up into Alberta, Canada. Go to that page, send me an email. We'll get you signed up. You'll help RBN reduce their utility bills, and you will save money and put money in your pocket also. But for those people that, are broke and, can't send anything in, this was a way they can help RBN reduce their utility bills and save money themselves. It won't cost them a penny to do it. Okay? So I just want everybody, I know everybody wants to help. This is a way they can do it, and it won't cost them anything, and they can help RBN tremendously. So
all right, well,
everybody, I don't know if everybody knows who I am. I'm the one that helped John cut the phone bills in half, and I even drove down to the network in Texas and spent 10 days down there rebuilding everything for you guys. So I've got a big personal interest in keeping RBN on the air, and I want, trying to find ways for everybody to help without costing them a penny out of their pocket. Okay?
well, thank you for the suggestion, Tom. And, every little bit is going to help. And also thank you for coming on down to the RBN studio and helping to keep that maintained, because it's all very old equipment. Parts wear out. Sometimes replacement parts aren't even available, and you have to start buying even more equipment to find a new workaround to get things to do that. And I certainly deal with that here on Oahu. And one of the things I'm looking forward to following our move later this year is that there'll be a much more availability of the components I need to keep things running.
Well, what do you need?
At the moment, nothing. And please don't send me anything, because it means I'm going to have to pay to ship it back to the mainland. And right now, in fact, starting in a couple of weeks, we're going to have some massive decluttering sales. We're just letting everything go except the music equipment, the computers that do the show here, some personal memorabilia. Everything else we're leaving behind. And just get the heck out of here before there's a mushroom cloud out that window.
All right, well, when you get back to CONUS, you give me a call. If you need anything, I'll do my best to help you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
All right, have a good evening, and we're going to let you go. All right, the phone lines are now open. Let's get on back to the news. Apparently, the United States is now officially listing Venezuela as a national security concern. And does that mean that Venezuelan troops are, storming the beaches in the Gulf of Mexico? No, not really. Does it mean that Venezuelan troops are storming the border between Mexico and the United States? No. Does it mean that Venezuelan missiles are flying overhead right now targeting our cities? No, doesn't mean that either. What does it mean? Well, it means that Venezuela won't do what they're told. That's the national security concern. National security is everybody does what we tell them to do. And of course, it's all about control of the massive amount of oil that Venezuela has and ensuring that it is sold around the world only for that US dollar. Now, the United States is seeking to shut down Venezuela's emergency food aid program. This was reported in the Wall Street Journal. And the emergency food program, known by its Spanish initials CLAP, is the main food source for an estimated 15% of Venezuelans and a critical supplement for a far larger percentage of the population. And apparently the justification is that the CLAP program is being used by the Maduro government to launder money. Now, the stated goal of the U.S. policy is to combat the corruption of the Venezuelan government. The unstated reality is that the Trump administration is doing exactly what it's accusing the Maduro government of doing. It's weaponizing access to food. They're laying siege to the country. Turning back over to the Middle East, Palestinian officials are going to boycott a U.S.-led conference in Bahrain next month aimed at garnering regional support for President Donald Trump's deal of the century peace plan. Now, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia plan to attend the conference, and the U.S. administration will use the conference, which is set to take place next month, pardon me, to unveil the first part of Trump's deal of the century, which is going to be focused on economic opportunities for Palestinians. Well, the Palestinians aren't interested in being bribed or bought out. They're still waiting to hear what's going to happen, like to the status of Jerusalem, control of the borders, the fate of the refugees. And so the way that Trump and Kushner are trying to put this out there in three parts is they're going to offer the carrot. We'll give you money. We'll open up all this financial opportunity for you. We're going to help you rebuild your economy. We'll make sure that, Israel is, more generous with, letting stuff in and out of Palestine. Then they're going to hit them with the other side, which is in exchange, you will be renamed New Palestine. You'll still be subordinate to the Israeli government, and you will surrender your claims to a right of return. Now, over at the United Nations, Jason Greenblatt, who's the U.S. envoy in the Middle East, basically talked up the meeting about of the Security Council about boosting the Palestinian economy. But apparently the talk of prosperity falls flat at the UN, because there have been times when prosperity has been there in Palestine. And here's what the Palestinians are probably thinking. Yes, they've starved us down to the point where we're desperate for any kind of money. They cut off all the aid. So we go on in. They're going to give us a bunch of money. We surrender our right of return. We surrender our claims on East Jerusalem or whatever else is in this plan. Who's to say that somewhere down the road, Israel doesn't go back to shutting those border crossings and starving the Palestinians again to drive them out? Because that's Israel's ultimate goal. They don't want to peacefully coexist with the Palestinians. They want them gone. They want Gaza back. They want all of the West Bank. They want the Palestinians to skedaddle across the border into refugee camps in other nations like Jordan. Okay, we're going to take another phone call here. Gary in Arkansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back into the show where that nice lady was talking about treason and the Republic, et cetera, et cetera. The problem I see is that there's one layer of this onion we're trying to unpeel, or trying to peel, that's not being exposed. I have some interesting questions for you. Why are there dual citizens in this country? Why are there American nationals and U.S. citizens, Inc.? Okay? Who holds my birth certificate? Who holds the $1 million birth certificate bond when I was born? Where is the Articles of Incorporation of this USA, Inc.? Who are the stockholders of that corporation? I heard that two of the shares, there was 100 shares issued on the last time it was incorporated. Two of them went to two people in the United States whose name weren't mentioned, and 98 of them went overseas. We got to get back to the 1776 Constitution if we're going to fix it. You can't fix the USA Inc. Constitution, which is a knockoff of the 1776 Constitution. Now you show me who are the shareholders of USA Inc. Answer that question.
Well, I imagine that's probably going to be pretty much the Wall Street bankers and the Federal Reserve. And of course, I'm trying to remember who it was, that congressman who basically got up in Congress and said, the U.S. is already in a state of bankruptcy. As far as there being a $1 million bond on the birth certificate, I've never heard that before, and I would have to take that one with a grain of salt. I mean, the purpose of a birth certificate is to basically start the paperwork process of bringing the newborn child into the governmental system, just as the death certificate starts the paperwork process of deleting them.
Yeah, then why are there two two citizenships in the United States.
Well, birth certificate and dual citizenship are completely unrelated, and I'm in agreement. We shouldn't allow dual citizenship in this country. We certainly should not allow dual citizens within our government.
You are a dual citizen. You are an American citizen.
Okay, we're getting a problem on the phone line. I'm not a dual citizen. I was born in Boston.
No.
Gary, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, you went away for a while. So you made the comment that I'm a dual citizen. Could you clarify?
You are an American national by birth on American soil by American parents, and you are a U.S. Inc. citizen by virtue that you're going to have a Social Security number and are paying FICA and etc. So you're straddling the fence
I don't
here.
think that really constitutes being a dual citizen. The idea of USA Inc., they've been running this government as a corporation for a long time.
That's right. And it's a foreign corporation under Title 36. Rod Class won this in a lawsuit in Washington, D.C.
Okay, what do you mean by a foreign corporation?
Huh?
I've never heard this idea about USA Inc. being a foreign corporation. Frankly, I'm having a little credibility problem here, which is okay. We got to take another break for commercials. Gary, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, if you'd like to help out Republic Broadcasting, and they do need your assistance there, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. I thank you. All of you who have been very generous over these last several weeks. It has had an impact, and we do thank you very much. Okay, Germany is still drawing a lot of criticism for their recent passage of a bill equating the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement with anti-Semitism. And while the move was actually symbolic and non-binding, it is having a ripple effect around the world. And of course, Israel's already out in other countries saying, see, Germany did it. You should pass a similar law here. But basically, the German parliament has smeared the quest for Palestinian rights as anti-Semitism. And they're out there saying that being critical of Israel's actions means you hate the Jewish people. And that's absurd. If you are opposed to whaling, does that mean you hate the Japanese people? If you are preferring electric cars over gasoline cars, does that mean you hate the Arabs? Of course not. But it is amazing how Israel comes up with these extreme ideas right out of Orwellian newspeak. You know, freedom is slavery, and BDS is anti-Semitism, and so forth and so on. And everybody seems to go for it. But no, criticism of the actions of the government of Israel does not mean we hate the Jewish people. Over in the European Union, despite EU claims that they oppose Israel's construction of settlements in the occupied territories and they consider it a war crime, the European Union is expanding its partnership with Bank Leumi, a major financier of Israeli settlements on Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank. Apparently last Monday, Emmanuel Guaffre, the EU ambassador to Tel Aviv, trumpeted news that the European Investment Fund and Bank Leumi are expanding a loan program for tech companies in Israel, many of them to be built in the West Bank. So even Britain's foreign minister is out there saying that boycotting Israel is anti-Semitic. And he's out there basing that on saying that if you're not buying Israeli products, you're equated to the Nazis who refuse to buy from Jews. Well, that's a very crude World War II Nazi reference, and it means you've already lost the argument if you go for it. But we're not Nazis. And by the way, I have a comment, okay? A while back, I had to buy some very special batteries, which happened to be made in Israel. They were supposed to last 6 months. They lasted 2 weeks. I'll never buy those batteries again. It's not because I hate Jews. It's because they're lousy batteries. And I have a right to say these batteries are not delivering the performance they promised, and therefore I do not choose to buy them, and I don't recommend that anybody else buys them. That's not discrimination. It's not racism. It's product awareness. Now, a poll has come on out from the Jewish Electorate Institute showing that Israel right now is the lowest policy priority for Jewish American voters. And apparently a candidate's stance on Israel ranks at the bottom of a list of 16 policy priorities of Jewish voters. And I would imagine that probably somebody needs to do a similar survey on non-Jewish voters and find it looks like the voters just don't care. And so when the candidates get up there and start screaming about, I love Israel, I support Israel, I'm going to do, it's falling on deaf ears according to this poll. And apparently more than 53% of those polled are critical of at least some of the current Israeli government policies. So what is Netanyahu going to do? Come on out and scream about all those self-hating Jewish American voters? Israel's behavior is the issue, not their religion, not their ethnicity, not where they came from. It's their actions, their behavior that is the problem, and it's even turning off Jewish people around the world. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, came out with this assertion during a debate at the United Nations Security Council recently, claiming that Jewish rights to the land of Israel depend on 4 pillars: the Bible, history, legality, and the pursuit of international peace and security. That last one is definitely stretching a point there, given Israel's record of attacking its neighbors. So it's arrogance, and it's like this thing that BDS is anti-Semitism. It's just another really absurd statement that everybody is just expected to go along with. Now, the Bible, of course, is subject to interpretation. There are all kinds of versions of it. The biblical Hebrews, the Hebrews described in the Bible, are not the Jews who live in Israel today. Most of those are Ashkenazi. But again, it's an absurdity. And even this article from Middle Eastern Monitor is saying this is an absurd claim to make. But then there have been so many absurd claims made by Israel. And out of politeness and out of fear of being called an anti-Semite, we close our yaps and we don't say, you know, this really is kind of absurd here. All right, Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan has issued new rules, new restrictions on the methods through which the Pentagon and defense officials are allowed to share information with congressional offices or committees. He's actually came out and said this is intended to increase transparency. Hardly. The policy imposes serious limits, telling officials to only give Congress official summaries instead of actual plans, and sets officials within the Pentagon who decide whether a congressional request can be proven to be legitimate. So this is clearly intended to further limit information sharing at a time when many in Congress are complaining they're not being kept informed about what's going on in all the war zones around the world. Okay, let's take a phone call here from Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, good day to you, Michael. What's on my mind is Trump did sign an order today, and a memorandum, I believe it is, for no legal immigrants are going to get Section 8 housing, no
Good.
freebies anymore. That was a Bill Clinton bill that he passed in 1996. I wonder why it took so long for a president to sign that bill. If Clinton proposed that bill and it was his bill that he put down, why wasn't that enforced? So all these illegals wouldn't come here because they all need Section 8 housing because they're going to live in tents for the next 20 years? That should have been enforced.
Probably a lot of them are.
Ago.
I mean, I have to wonder how much of the homeless problem does consist of the illegal immigrants.
Exactly. Yeah, Michael, and another thing that's perplexing, I'm going to tell you this. I'll give you a little heads up on something that's going to happen in Europe. If this Marina Le Pen gets elected in France, I believe it's next week, whenever
Yes.
they have their election, it's going to shock Europe like it's never been shook because you got Salvini backing her, and I think even the other guy for Trump that was helping Trump, he's over there helping her. I believe if she gets elected in Farage, Nigel Farage gets elected in England, I think that's going to shake the core of these New World Order Soros-loving fools.
Yeah, I think
I think it's going to be a big change.
absent massive election fraud, I think this EU election is definitely going to be the rise of the nationalists.
Absolutely. And, Michael, Pelosi and all these demon rats, they keep talking about Trump's taxes. What about Nancy Pelosi and her husband? Are they ever looking into their finances, or Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, all the money they made? Where's and Maxine Waters? How's a congresswoman living in a $4.5 million home in L.A.? I mean, they're talking. All the media does is talk Trump. How much he owes in taxes? The guy probably paid over $1 billion in taxes. He gives his whole presidential salary up. You don't even take a salary for being president. But you got this Mad Maxine and this nutcase Pelosi. He's probably got $1 million in that face of hers. I guarantee there's $1 million in plastic surgery in that face. And they're talking about Trump's taxes. What about these people's taxes and all the Democrats?
I remember back in 2016. Somebody actually did ask Nancy Pelosi, well, if you want Trump to show his tax records, then why don't you show yours? And she simply said, I'm not running for president. But as a point of fact, there are actually 2 laws on the books that say that the tax records of these officials in Congress, the White House and so forth, their taxes have to be open to public inspection. And again, this is a fishing expedition. They're making a big deal out of the taxes. They're hoping they're going to find something criminal in there. The tax code is so messed up, it's impossible to not have broken a law someplace in there anyway, and maybe that's what the Democrats are counting on. But in the end, I think it may prove embarrassing to Trump that he has lost quite a bit of money rather than making quite a bit of money. But outside the embarrassment, I don't think there's a there.
I agree with you, Michael, but look at Joe Biden's son, Hunter. This
Yes.
guy's taking $50,000 a month from the Chinese. I guarantee you, once they go investigate that case, that's going to blow up like a atomic bomb because that Joe Biden and his son were doing some illegal activities. I guarantee it. And then you got Bernie Sanders' wife. Remember, she had they said she took some money from a university or something, and they were looking into her. I guess they were going to indict her or something.
Yep.
Remember that last year, Bernie Sanders' wife? Whatever happened with that?
Apparently, it didn't go anywhere. We have a 2-tiered society. We have the elites who can behave like that and pretty much for the most part get away with it, like the Clintons. And then you have us, plebes, who are expected to just absolutely toe the line on all of the myriad laws.
Michael, one more thing. I know you other callers. How did Soros get all his money into Koch brothers? What are these guys famous for getting all this billions of dollars? What did these guys ever do? George Soros
Well,
and the Koch brothers.
they're very lucky.
What are these guys famous for?
They're very lucky. They have huge amounts of money. Soros actually began his fortune collaborating with the Nazis, hunting down his fellow Jews during World War II, for which he got a portion of their assets. And then he had this one daring gamble that he did against the Bank of England, where he literally broke the bank, and that's where he got the majority of his fortune. And it is a reality in the way economics runs in this world. Once you're above a certain level of wealth, it's almost impossible to ever lose it or go broke. It just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. Of course, subsequent generations may just spend it all. And there have been quite a few cases of people who've amassed a fortune in their lives. They die, their kids get it, and they just go on out and spend it, and it's all gone in a couple of years.
Right. Michael, is it true that Soros is not allowed in Hungary? He'll be arrested?
I believe that's the case, that there's a warrant out for him.
I heard that on OAN. But one more thing, Michael, you got to watch OAN news, because every hour and the hour they're talking about immigration. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
It's over 150 billion. They're sending 150 billion dollars back to all these third world countries. That money will never come back to the United States.
Nope.
Remittances. And right there in itself, that should be taxed to death. Trump's worried about tariffs. He should tax all that money. That's what he needs to do with an executive order. Tax that money.
That's going to be a little bit hard, because most of these illegals, they don't have Social Security numbers and they don't file tax returns. You know, they just stick the money in an envelope and they take it to the post office, and it just, whizzes on off, or it's done by transfer. But yeah, this illegal immigration situation is hemorrhaging cash at a time when our economy is already hovering at the edge.
Wow. Well, thank you for your time, Michael. Thank you. And I'm going to be donating some to you soon. As soon as I get my income tax check, if I ever get it back, I'll take care of it. I'm going to donate some to RBN. That's for sure.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We appreciate that here. And
yes, you'll be getting some from me soon.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Dustin called back in. Dustin, did you have something to add to what you said before? Dustin, are you there? Or is this the phony Dustin?
No, this is the real one.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, on Mike, Tom just mentioned the Koch brothers. They're linked to Mike Pompeo, and Trump put Mike Pompeo in.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's this group of people. It's just like whatever. I don't know. Like with Trump, it's like I just don't know. Like with this thing with the pardoning. And getting it, Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity's part of the establishment. He didn't even come to bat for Assange, right? He used Assange. Remember when he had the interview with Assange? And then, I haven't heard anything from Sean Hannity about Assange after Assange was, arrested. Have you?
Well, the latest word out on that case is that if the United States gets him back here it gets Assange back to the U.S., he's going to be charged under Title VIII, and they're going to be seeking a life sentence.
Yeah, I just don't see, because, I had that kind of hope. Remember we were talking about that? Trump going to bring him back, and he's going to get this whole thing is going to come down. Remember everybody was saying it ain't going to happen, because this guy's an enemy of people around Trump, which is the deep state. This guy's in trouble. He's not going to be helped out by Trump. That's what leads to me with this pardoning, Mike. If you pardon these guys, these war criminal soldiers that we got, are they in custody right now, these couple soldiers?
I don't know. I mean, there's more than a few of them. I know that the one that was pardoned a little while ago had already been paroled from military prison. So the pardon is basically added to his record saying presidential pardon, but it's not going to materially affect his life. Some of them may be in prison. They're going to be released. Some of them are awaiting trial. They may be out on whatever the military court equivalent of bail is. But again, it's just sending the wrong message. And even Pentagon officials are saying, no, this is a bad idea. It's sending a message that it's okay for U.S. troops to behave like this, and that's bad for morale and discipline. But we've been heading down this path for a very, very long time. This didn't start here with Trump, because all the way back, even before the war with Iraq, the U.S. was going around to other countries and signing these treaties to basically make it illegal for any American officials or military personnel to be arrested on their soil, to be transported to the International Criminal Court, to be prosecuted for war crimes. In other words, they were indemnifying themselves for war crimes before the wars even got started. And when that was all happening back then, I said, the only reason they're going to this effort to block the possibility of prosecution for war crimes is they're getting ready to do something that will involve war crimes.
And Britain also. Remember, they did that too?
Yes.
Yes, so it's this whole group. I wonder if France did that too. I don't think Germany did, but I'm probably curious if France did the same thing about like pulling their sword. But Mike, if he pardons these people, like, and then what happens if they commit, like, if they kill like a U.S. citizen, like a girl? Because didn't one of them kill a girl over there?
Yeah.
You know, what happens if they do harm to an American girl? Are the people like Sean Hannity still gonna, you know, or Mike Pompeo call these guys heroes? These guys ain't heroes. These guys are embarrassment, man. Like, I mean, it's like the Blackwater people. Remember they're shooting up the place in Iraq?
Yes.
The U.S. don't like Blackwater, even though they're former U.S. soldiers or former soldiers from other countries, because it gives the U.S. military a bad name. You know, I mean, there is good people in the military. They're not all bad apples. But
no, they aren't. But stop and think for a minute. In like 20 to 30 years, when they're starting to make movies about World War III, the filmmakers are going to focus on the actions of these individuals and basically put them up there and say, see, this is what the Americans were like, just the way that they do now with movies about World War II. Because not all the Nazi soldiers were cruel and vicious and harmful. Most of them were just trying to get through the war and, you know, obey their orders and get back with all their anatomical parts intact.
You know, Mike, I came to the conclusion Trump's fighting this neoliberal order, but I think Trump believes in America, the imperialist empire, I think. Make America, like you said, that's the way I think, because these people are still around him. Mike Pompeo, he must believe in what these people think, because otherwise you wouldn't have these people around you in the first place after all this time.
Well, he brought these people in as a favor to some of his backers, like Sheldon Adelson, who said, you will bring Bolton in. And so at some point, you know, Trump is trying to figure, you know, where does my obligation to Sheldon Adelson end? And obviously, if Trump is serious about running in 2020, he needs Sheldon Adelson's money, which may be why Bolton still has a job, is the way that this kind of thing works. But yeah, Make America Great Again may have been an imperialistic cry rather than a call to rebuild our nation.
Well, then Trump's ignorant, because America, you know, this is America versus United States of Empire, and I can't see us going back to being America anymore. There's just too much.
No,
money.
we've gone too far down that road. The economy's too far over the edge of the cliff here. We're either going to have to let it all collapse and rebuild from scratch, or we're going to get into a major war with Russia and China, in which case we're probably going to lose that one. And then we'll have to rebuild from that mess, which is going to be much, much harder.
Okay, Mike, that's all I got to say today. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to switch over to Sherry in Texas. And Sherry, I'm going to have to take you through the next commercial break. But go ahead and get started.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is that I heard Sweden was probably, they're vying to get Assange.
Yes.
On the probably bogus sex abuse charge. He may get a more fair deal out of Sweden, and I think it's ticking America off, because they want to make an example of him, and they know it, and I don't want him to do that. I'm just happy. I hope Sweden wins, because I think the whole thing's unfair anyway.
Yeah, it really is, and you're right. They want to make an example of him. Okay, Sherry, stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Sherry in Texas. We're talking about Julian Assange. There's a tug of war going on. where Sweden has reactivated this sex assault case against him, which had been dropped before because it looked like the plaintiffs, the victims' stories were not solid. And this may be Sweden deciding that maybe Assange is better off in their country than in the United States. And with this new story on out that the U.S. is seeking a life sentence for espionage, they may be right. And I hope Assange is able to get to Sweden, and that Sweden will refuse to extradite then to the United States of America. But again, you need to look very carefully at Title 18. Julian Assange did not go out and commit espionage. He did not solicit anybody to commit espionage. Certainly, Hillary Clinton is far more guilty of felony violations of Title 18 than Julian Assange, and she's still walking around free and talking way too much. So, yeah, Sherry, you're absolutely right. They want to make an example out of Julian Assange. They're trying to terrify the independent media into silence as more and more surfaces about the horrors that this new U.S. aggression against the rest of the world is causing.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to jump ahead with something that you haven't gotten to yet about the abortion issue in the hospitals. And I can do it another time.
No, go ahead. You've got about 3 minutes.
Okay, I can do it in that time. This new anti-abortion movement, at its core, I don't think has anything to do with letting the patient decide the outcome because it's her body. This is what disturbs me, Mike. The hospital can't afford to get involved. If it's still, well, it creates a huge conflict of interest if the hospital is profiting from the sale of fetal parts. There's legal consequences there. What's new is that the patient and the new life are not being treated with the utmost respect. That's what's new. Medical decisions are necessary, and consulting with families are necessary. I was a clinical social worker for 3 years, so I know something about this. But both mother and child need new levels of care and assistance and resources. There's new things out there that they need to be told about. These volunteer organizations that will help with college. None of all these new resources and other levels of care that they could be created, none of which would include profiting from the late-term abortion. And by the way, a cesarean has always existed to save the life of a mother. We saw that Julian Assange, but Downton Abbey's creator.
Yes.
Fellows. He researches really well. And Dr. Clarkson, you know, he was a private doctor, by the way, but he also served the community. And yeah, this is it. And let's change. Let's keep the laws where they were, and let's open up to new assistance, new agencies, volunteer organizations that can help get the profiting out of the
Sherry, I'm going to have to cut you off because we got to do station identification. It occurs to me that this push for late term, right up to the moment of birth abortions is simply to provide a larger supply of raw material for whoever it is who's buying this fetal tissue. Okay. Anyway, we'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So let's go to a phone call from Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I think Iran, if they're smart, should make it very clear to Israel that any attack by the U.S. will be considered an attack by Israel. They should make it clear we're not Iraq. We know who's behind this American attack, and with the AIPAC and other Israeli lobby groups.
Well, Iraq said exactly the same thing. That's why they were shooting those Scud missiles over Israel during that war, which unfortunately the Scud was no match for the Patriot. And but everybody in the Middle East knows who's really driving all of this hostility.
Because, you know, Israel's a tiny country. I mean, they're probably smaller than Long Island.
No, they're about half the size of New Jersey.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. But the Iranians have to make it clear. You go. They know it's the Israeli lobby pushing the U.S. So they have to make it clear to Netanyahu. We know it's you. So any attack by the U.S. will consider it's by Israel. And but I'm a little disappointed with the Iranians with this rhetoric. We'll fight and that plays into the neocons' hand.
Yeah, it does. It does. But, that may be intended for domestic consumption. It may be Rouhani speaking to the people of Iran, and of course it gets picked up and used for propaganda purposes elsewhere.
That's a big mistake. I think the Iranians should call Trump, call him, and just talk to him. How could it hurt?
Trump doesn't want to talk. I mean, they had a deal. They had the P5+1 deal, and Trump just walked out of it. And Trump has indicated he wants to talk to basically renegotiate the deal, which would include Iran's long-range missiles. What the U.S. goal in Iran is to strip Iran of any weapons of deterrence to make it easier to invade them. And I think Iran is definitely not going to be willing to go along with that in the face of the U.S. invading this country, that country over there, that country back here.
Yes. But I think even so, they should call Trump. And, sometimes a personal relationship can avert a war. And you talk to him and you say, well, we respectfully disagree, President Trump. I think talking, the Iranians, I don't like their rhetoric. And they should call Trump, tell him their position, and see what happens. But the main thing, they have to make it clear to Israel, we know it's you, and we're going after, God forbid, and I'm totally against any war.
Yeah.
But if there is a war, make it clear, Israel, we know it's you, and we're going after you.
Well, that again would also play into the neocon hands here. And to be very honest, I'm troubled by the rhetoric coming out of the U.S. government. It's, belligerent in the extreme. It's bullying. There's clearly no interest in any kind of diplomacy or negotiation, whether it's Iran or North Korea or any of these other countries. The attitude is, you do what we tell you to do, because we are the exceptional nation.
Yes. But, I think I heard Dustin before, who's a great caller. But, Trump, by his actions in hiring Bolton and Pompeo, I'm afraid he's part of it. I mean, in his foreign policy, does he have any non-neocon people that you can think of?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, except for the orange hair, you could squint your eyes and look at this and see the Bush White House.
That's what I see. I see the Bush White House. That's very disturbing. So, Dustin, hope springs eternal. I was reading a book about Stalin, and not everyone hated Stalin. A good portion of the Russians liked him.
Yes.
Maybe that was because of the propaganda they were fed, but a lot of people loved Stalin. Even when they were taking people to the camps, they were saying, it's not Stalin, it's Kaganovich, or it's Yeltsin, or Beria. Just like with Trump, people say, no, it's Bolton, it's Pompeo, and under Stalin, no one could believe, because of the cult personality, that it was Stalin. They all said it, no, he's being misled. He's being diverted.
Well, we have to be very careful here because, what we think we know about Stalinist Russia is being fed to us by institutions that we know distort history for political gain, whether it's our public schools or corporate media. We don't know that Stalin was all that bad. He made a lot of mistakes, Lysenkoism being one of them. But was it really as bad as we're being told? I don't know. We don't have a way to really know that. We can't really trust what we think we know about Stalinist Russia, or indeed much of the history of the Soviet Union, because so much of it was propaganda.
Yes. Well, I've read a good portion about the topic. I think it's his, you hear some of these guys on the alt, right? Oh, it was 66 million killed. Now, Robert Conquest, who's a historian this last few decades, he's been downgrading the death toll. First, he said it was 30 million, then 20 million.
Yeah.
And it went down to 15 million. Now, the famine in the Ukraine, that was really the bulk of the deaths that he caused by mismanagement. I do think...
Yeah, that's the Lysenkoism incident.
Yes, from what I've read, I think Stalin death toll before the war is...
Well, if you want to talk about mishandling, I mean, look at how they mishandled. First of all, the fact that with all the snow that fell this last winter, people had to know there were going to be heavy melt runoff, and that they should have been looking at flood control and making sure that it was going to withstand it all. And they didn't, because the money's being sent over to the war. So we've had these massive floods across the Midwest. The planting season has been delayed very, very late in the year. And even the United Nations is saying that the United States is facing a devastating food shortage this year.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Okay.
I had some thoughts. I think the U.S. should accept our empire's decline.
Well, they're not ready to do that, unfortunately, and history has shown that empires will never admit they're in decline. It's just as the closer and closer they get to the final collapse, the more they fling out violence and death in all directions. Anyway, Jim, I need to let you go. Need to get back to getting some news here. Turning to some of the domestic politics here, Attorney General Barr was interviewed on Fox News just about a week ago. And he said that the early handling of the so-called Trump-Russia collusion investigation is going to raise questions because it was first handled at a very senior level by a very small group. And it wasn't handled in the ordinary way that investigations or counterintelligence activities are conducted. It was sort of this ad hoc small group, and most of these people are no longer with the FBI or the CIA or the other agencies involved. The fact of the matter is, Bob Mueller did not look at the government's activities, just kept looking at Russia and the White House. So we're still hearing that Trump is going to declassify the so-called Bucket 5 Russiagate documents. These are the documents that supposedly provided exculpatory information, and had they been presented to the FISA court along with everything else, might have resulted in the FISA court saying, no, you can't spy on a presidential campaign. But the FBI basically cherry-picked the data. They went in with that bogus dossier that everybody now knows was a complete joke. They withheld the exculpatory information. And if Trump carries through with his promise to declassify this information, I can understand why Democrats, Obama, Pelosi, are in a bit of a panic here. And I just hope that somebody doesn't pressure Trump into not declassifying the information. Trump is proving to be a very, very weak leader. And I think just that idea that Sean Hannity was the one who suggested that he pardon these war criminals, and Trump went along with it, illustrates the point completely. He's not the man that we thought we were voting for. He's not even the man that we saw on the reality show, that strong, managerial, you're fired kind of person. That was an act. Now, Nancy Pelosi is still out there taking personal shots at Trump's mental state. What's going on is that there was that scheduled meeting yesterday, with the Democratic leaders on infrastructure, and somehow got provoked into talking about the phony investigations and walked on out. Now, Pelosi is saying it's one-sided exchange, and that it was in response to Pelosi's allegations that Trump was engaged in a cover-up. Pelosi is now claiming that this tantrum shows that Donald Trump is mentally unstable. So they're going back to this whole idea of the 25th Amendment. And so Pelosi is saying she prays for the president, and she's urging Trump's family to stage an intervention. Now, Pelosi she's not hot on the idea of impeachment, because it could be a petard for the Democratic Party, because if they go for an impeachment and they lose, if they fail, and they can't remove him from office because the GOP still holds the Senate, it's going to make it look like Trump was being victimized by the Democrats. It's going to work for him in 2020. So they may have gone back to the idea of just impeaching him. All righty. And again, it's only May of 2019. We've got so long to go before the actual elections begin. And already the media is out there slinging the mud. Last week, the Daily Beast ran the headline, "Tulsi Gabbard's campaign is being boosted by Putin apologists." And the subheadline read, "The Hawaii Congresswoman is quickly becoming the top candidate for Democrats who think the Russian leader is misunderstood." And the Gabbard campaign has received 75,000 individual donations, and the Daily Beast article is based on just 3 of them. Professor Stephen Cohen, activist Sharon Tennyson, and somebody using the name Goofy Grapes, who may or may not have once worked for comedian Lee Camp, who's currently employed by Russia Today. And on that very tenuous possible connection, they ran that headline. Now, Tulsi has gone public on what congressmen are told their first days in Congress. And she basically said, when you're a new member of Congress, there's a new member orientation. They give you these books. There's the maps. Here's where your office is, and the logistical stuff. And then almost immediately, the party leadership, and this is happening on both sides, not just the Democrats. And they said, she was told, if you work with a Republican, that's going to hurt the party, especially if you work with a Republican the Democratic Party is trying to take out. Forget the substance of the idea, forget the substance of the bill. And she says this happens all over. Both political parties are guilty of this, where they're putting the interests of their political party ahead of the people who just voted for us to go and serve them. So she's going to draw a lot of flack for that. But that's why people like Tulsi. She's very much telling it as it is, and I wish her a lot of luck. I don't agree with her on a lot of issues like the Second Amendment, but given her very pronounced anti-war rhetoric, the military-industrial complex is never going to let her anywhere near the nomination. Meanwhile, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out there claiming that Republicans are trying to pit the Jews against the Muslims and citizens against immigrants. And she made the remarks at a special congressional Muslim dinner. Well, I think the hostility between the Jews and the Muslims has a lot to do with the way they're treating each other. And I think the hostility between U.S. citizens and immigrant has a lot to do with the damage that unbridled illegal immigration is bringing into this country. But to Alexandria, oh, it's all the fault of the Republicans. If it weren't for the Republicans, the Jews and Muslims would be trading wet, sloppy kisses, and the U.S. citizens would be quickly learning Spanish so that they could get along with our new neighbors. Apparently, there's been a little bit of a tiff between Nancy Pelosi and Kellyanne Conway. Nancy Pelosi basically came on out and said that she'll only talk with Donald Trump, that she refuses to talk with any of the president's staff. It's either all the way to the top or it's off. And apparently Kellyanne Conway basically said Nancy Pelosi is being really pro-woman when she says she only talks to the president. Okay, Nevada is poised to become the 15th state to sidestep the Electoral College outcome. And there's this state Senate vote they had on Tuesday in which basically they're going to drop the traditional practice of awarding all its electors to the presidential candidate who won the state, and instead will award its electors to whoever receives the most votes across the entire country. And this is, of course, because Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. But Donald Trump ran the campaign by the rules everybody agreed to going on in, and he won. And Hillary doesn't like that. So now they want to change the rules. Now they can't get rid of the Electoral College without a constitutional amendment. So what they're going on into these states and doing are getting these laws passed that say whoever wins the nationwide popular vote gets our state's electors. These are the state legislators telling their own state voters, you don't matter as much anymore. We don't care about you. We're going to go with the flow. We're going to go with, the big boss. Apparently, Planned Parenthood is donating $38 million to the 2020 Democratic candidates. And boy, it just seems like they have all this money just lying around to hand on out here. So murder babies in the womb in the third trimester, and even on the day they survive an abortion, and then use taxpayer money to fund more insane infanticide laws across America. And again, as I told that caller, I think what's going on, the reason there's this push for late-term abortion and abortion right up to the moment of birth is it provides more of this raw material for these corporations that are buying these aborted baby parts from the abortion clinics. Why have one that's only this big when you can have one that's this big? I guess that's what it's like here. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break. And when we come on back, I want to talk about Ann Coulter. I have a hug and a punch relationship with her because some things she says I don't like, others she's bang spot on. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And Ann Coulter is out there with a new article responding to comments that the United States is becoming more and more like Europe, which, having been to Europe, is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think she's coming at it from the point of view of creeping socialism. But she says the reality is we're becoming Rome. And that is much worse for the future of the United States. And of course, that's something that I've been saying for quite a while, that there are so many parallels between the current United States and Rome just before it fell apart, or the Soviet Union just before it fell apart. Getting back on over to the New York Times, they have a little inflated sense of their own importance because every day on page A2, the New York Times runs this feature called Inside the Times, where one of its reporters tells us what it's like to be me at the New York Times. It's classic narcissistic behavior. And outside of their parents, I can't imagine anybody actually reading that. But apparently, one of the more recent ones was basically talking about how much fun it is to cover the Pentagon and all of its fabulous toys out there. This is Helene Cooper covering the best beat in Washington. And They're not toys, they're weapons. They're designed to kill people, blow things up. Over at MSNBC, Rachel Maddow's ratings are still in decline. And of course, we've known that she was anti-Trump all along. Remember going back to election night 2016 when it became obvious that Trump had won? She came out and she said, "You're awake, by the way. You're not having a terrible, terrible dream. Also, you're not dead and you have not gone to hell. This is your life now. This is our election now. This is us. This is our country. It's real." And of course, over the last more than 2 years during this whole Mueller investigation, Rachel Maddow was out there every single day. "Oh yes, we're going to get him now. We're going to prove it. We're going to prove that Russia stole the election from our beloved Empress Hillary I." And Rachel spent 2 years dissecting every aspect of the special counsel's investigation. And of course, when the Mueller investigation finally came on out and said, "We didn't find anything," she actually broke into tears on air. And I don't think it was faked. I think she understood that her credibility was destroyed. And it has been. She does not have the audience she did once. CNN is in ratings collapse. They have lost 43% of their prime time and 47% of their daytime viewership. Well, don't worry, you've still got that captive audience in all the nation's airports. Turning to the economic news, boy, we're way behind on the talking points today. I'm going to have to take most of these into tomorrow. China is saying trade talks won't continue unless the U.S. addresses its wrong actions. And China's Commerce Ministry said if the U.S. would like to keep on negotiating, it should, with sincerity, adjust its wrong actions. Only then can talks continue. This came from Ministry of Commerce spokesperson Gao Feng. Now, he didn't mention any U.S. action specifically, but it has been a tense couple of weeks between the world's two largest economies. And Trump unexpectedly accused China of reneging on a deal earlier this month and announced that tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods would increase to 25% from 10% on May 10th. Beijing retaliated with raising levies on $60 billion worth of U.S. products. So then we had the U.S. government putting Chinese telecom giant Huawei on a blacklist that prevents it from buying from American companies without U.S. government permission. So it looks like Xi Jinping may be readying the big club. And President Xi Jinping unexpectedly toured a rare earth mining facility following the U.S. announcement of sanctions on Huawei. The message is unmistakable. China is willing to use its domination of rare earth elements, which is used in virtually all high-tech manufacturing, to gain some leverage in the trade dispute. Now, the United States does have rare earth element deposits, but not enough. These materials are used in magnets, they're used in cell phones, they're used in computers, they're used in weapon systems. And China provides 90% of the world's supply. And they could simply shut it all down. And that would be a major, major problem. China's media is saying that the trade war is going to become white hot this summer, like it already isn't yet. And yeah, it's just building the tension. And at some point, yeah, we could see the trade war become a full-on real shooting war. And because neither country can physically invade the other, we're talking about missiles. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news and the trade war with China. And apparently this is no longer on a government-to-government level, because Xingang Motor Vehicle Inspection Station has notified all of their employees that the use of iPhones, driving in American automobiles, eating in American fast food restaurants, using American household products, and even traveling to the U.S. is now forbidden by a company policy. Any employee who violates the new rules would be fired. So it's getting serious. It's a boycott. Now they're boycotting America. That's actually going to make the trade imbalance even worse. So after Huawei, people are now starting to ask, is the U.S. going to start banning other Chinese firms, putting them on the blacklist to prohibit them from doing business with American firms? And who does it hurt more? The Chinese companies or the American firms? And what's really going on here? Now, interestingly enough, over in, Europe, Steve Bannon, former White House chief strategist, has come on out and said that destroying Huawei is more important than striking a trade deal. That's an absolutely insane situation. Huawei is a global company. And yes, you could cut off all commerce between Huawei and the United States of America, and if in the process you can't end the trade war, it's just going to make things worse for the American people. Small businesses that were doing business with China, American farmers, well, I guess they're not really going to have a lot to send to China anyway, because we're going to have food shortages here. I think we better think about keeping all American agricultural produce here in America right now. India has knuckled under grudgingly to threaten U.S. sanctions and is going to stop buying Iranian oil imports. They made it very clear they weren't happy about this, that it was under pressure from the United States. And again, I think the rest of the world is getting really tired of the U.S. throwing its weight around. I mentioned this in a phone call earlier today. The United Nations is now warning millions will be affected by food crisis in 2019, devastation to strike America. And again, it's a sign of the poor management of this country. You know, pointing to the global warming, snowfalls are a thing of the past. Government ignored the heavy snowpack buildup from this last winter. And anybody looking at that knew there was going to be a heavy melt runoff in the spring. Now, wise management at that point would have looked at the inundation zones and said, let's make sure that all the flood control is in good shape, that it's not blocked with a lot of rubbish that needs to be cleared out. But that didn't get done. And so we had these massive floods all over the Midwest. Some of the areas are still to this day flooded. A lot of the others, the soil is simply too saturated to plant seeds. The seeds will drown. Normally at this time of year, 60% of America's cornfields would be planted. It's only 30%, half of that. So yeah, we're going to have a bit of a food problem. Then you have the fact that pork supplies from China are going to be cut off, both because of the tariffs and because they've been hit with this massive African swine flu. Fish from the Gulf of Mexico are contaminated. Fish from the Pacific Ocean are contaminated. And right now, because of the immigration absence of any enforcement, we have, according to MIT and Yale, an estimated 22 million illegal immigrant mouths who are going to be competing with American citizens for what food there actually is. This is an epic disaster in the making, and nobody in the government wants to talk about it. They're too busy out there talking about abortion and LGBTQ rights. And, you know, I'm beginning to realize that the reason that they're making such a big deal about these things is because they know they can't fix the problems. They let it all get way too out of control. They can't really fix the economy. They can't fix the flooding. They can't fix the coming food famine. So they need to continue justifying their jobs as legislators and leaders of our country. So they gin up all this stuff and say, oh, this is what you should be worried about. Pay no attention to that flooding water coming on down your street. You've got to pick a side in the abortion debate. Apparently, when Goldman Sachs was negotiating its deal with New York City in 2005 to build its new headquarters building at 200 West Street, one of its requirements was that it have a seat along with the New York City Police Department in a taxpayer-funded spy center to keep the Main Street riffraff under surveillance. And basically, Goldman seems to think the pitchforks might be coming out after an epic crash on Wall Street. And the spy center was built, and both Goldman and JP Morgan Chase were given seats along with the New York Fed, Citigroup, and others. So the spy center isn't about law enforcement or crime prevention as much as it's about keeping an eye on the little people, for the bankers. Up in Silicon Valley, right outside Google's headquarters, there is this recreational vehicle camp that has sprung up just outside the headquarters. These are people who work at Google but can't get an apartment because the Bay Area rents have been driven too high. So they're living in these mobile homes. They park them right outside the Google headquarters. The problem is neighbors there are out there saying this has to go away. This RV camp has to be driven away. Where are they going to go? Okay, during the first quarter of this year, the world's top oil firms' combined profits shrank by 4%. People are driving less. Well, the price of gas has gone up here. John Rubino, in an interview, came on out and said, it's too far gone. Little can be done to redeem the U.S. economic machine, and I'm afraid that I agree with him. And part of the problem is that those who are in control of the machine don't want any changes because it's working for them. The wealth is pouring out of the workers whose labor created that wealth. It's pouring into the pockets of the hedge fund managers and the bankers. They think that's just fine. And when it all comes apart, they'll jet off to the Cayman Islands or something and live lives of luxury. A lot of that happened during the Depression of the 1930s, where those who didn't get crushed grabbed their money and they left, went other places here. We talk about precious metals as a place for investment. Usually we mean silver and gold. Interestingly enough, in recent years, copper has been promoted as an investment metal. And that always kind of struck me as a little weird because when I was a kid, copper is what you made the plumbing out of. You know, copper is what pennies were made out of. Well, if you went into copper, you're probably regretting that because apparently copper is getting annihilated. The price of copper is going down. Maybe it too is being manipulated, like silver and gold. We know they're being manipulated. We don't know to what extent. But there are all kinds of experts saying that silver and gold should be worth a heck of a lot more than they are right now. Here's an interesting little article. This came out of the Huffington Post. Why America Can't Solve Homelessness. And they're talking about how in 2005, up in Utah, they said, we're going to take a new approach to homelessness. Instead of taking care of these people while they're on the streets, we'll just give homeless people homes. And they started providing no strings attached apartments to the chronically homeless people who had lived on the streets for at least a year, suffered from mental illness, substance abuse, or physical disability. And over the next 10 years, Utah built hundreds of housing units, hired dozens of social workers, and reduced chronic homelessness by 91%. Now, the results, understandably, were a sensation. We even talked about them here on the show. But it turns out things weren't as they seemed because Salt Lake City targeted this small subset of the homeless population and got a 91% reduction. But the overall homeless problem got worse. And apparently between 2005 and 2015, the number of people sleeping in the city's emergency homeless shelters more than doubled. Unsheltered homelessness has continued to rise. So apparently they thought if they built a few hundred housing units, they'd be out of the woods. No, it wouldn't. You have to change the reasons people are becoming homeless. And that's because of this economy. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's what's going on. Plus the rampant greed of the Wall Street bankers. Our nation is being plundered right before our eyes, and ordinary law-abiding American citizens are paying the price for it. Whether it's Wall Street that's plundering the nation, the military-industrial complex who's plundering the nation, the illegal immigrants who are plundering the nation, we are being plundered. That is the perfect word for it. Now, getting back to the idea of a housing shortage, Amazon is selling entire houses for less than $20,000 with free shipping. Now, they're rather small, but I saw the picture of them. They're kind of cute, actually. It's more of a cabin. But prefabricated and modular housing is having its moment. And from 2013 to 2018, industry revenue grew an annualized 8.6%. Now, obviously, you still have to pay for the land the house is going on. But $20,000 for a physical building isn't all that bad. And they'll ship it to you. And you can either put it together yourself or you can hire somebody to assemble it for you. So apparently some of them are, let's see, the Realty reported they have this 172 square foot cabin prefab, $7,250. Now the fact of the matter is this is not a new idea. Prefabricated houses have a long history in the United States. An early version of a prefab home was sent from England in the 1600s. And if you're familiar with the history here in Hawaii, one of the houses down in the Mission Houses Museum, where the missionaries would live, was sent from Boston as a prefab as well. But real prefabrication did not take off until the house kits. And the Aladdin Company started selling house kits in 1906. And one of the best known early kit home sellers was Sears, Roebuck and Company, which sold more than 100,000 homes from 1908 to 1940. And the advantage, of course, is that these prefabricated homes get the same advantage that automobiles do. They're being built on an assembly line, which gives them an advantage in productivity and volume versus cost. So I think it's a great idea. Article coming on out from Blacklisted News. Even before the recession has officially begun, some large U.S. firms are laying off thousands of workers. And they're starting off with this claim that the economy is booming and bright days are ahead, and saying, why are so many large corporations laying off thousands of workers? And they talk about that, such as Ford Motor Company, which has announced they're laying off approximately 20,000 workers. Well, in the case of many of these large corporations, their revenue comes from selling products to the American people, and the American people don't have the money to buy those products anymore. They're hanging on to their older smartphones, they're hanging on to their older software, they're hanging on to their older cars. They don't want to take on another auto loan because they don't have the confidence they're going to be able to pay for it. Apparently, Adobe, which is a software company, has come on out saying that older licenses of some of their products are no longer valid, even though they were perpetual licenses, and saying that if you dare to use the software you bought and paid for back then, instead of buying a new version from us, we'll come get you. Like I said, we're being plundered. Over in Maryland, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement are on a manhunt for suspected MS-13 members who were released by the Maryland jail despite an ICE detainer. And these MS-13 members allegedly murdered a 14-year-old girl. So how's that cultural enrichment coming for you here? We're hearing a lot of conflicting information about Theresa May, and originally it was said she was going to resign yesterday. Then they're saying she'll resign on Friday, and frankly, it's going to take a lot of sandpaper and paint to get the claw marks out of the door frame at number 10. Okay, let's take a phone call. Todd in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Thank you for taking my call, Mike. Good day to you as well. Yes, I'm with you and many others. I don't see the jobs. I see a very, what I would call political analyst kind of job in this way. Most of the jobs I see are militarized jobs, like in the military-industrial complex. I don't see anything coming in anywhere outside of that domain. That being said, I do see, like you have pointed out, I have pointed out, by the way, I'm about your same age. I'm 54, so I see things.
Thank you for being so flattering. I'm considerably older than that.
Well, you look good for your age, but let's say this. Good idea of you to get out of Hawaii.
Yes.
Bad idea. Hawaii is going bankrupt.
Yes.
The amount of homelessness on your beaches is incredible. I will not visit Hawaii. I've made a decision to not come. I mean it.
You know, I don't blame you. We used to have friends who'd come out here like once a year, and they won't come here anymore. They don't like being harassed by the TSA. And prices here are just through the roof. And, you know, aside from the threat of a mushroom cloud out that window, we just can't afford to live here anymore. And where we're going to be surrounded by family who can help me take care of Claire. Anyway, listen, Todd, stay on the line. I'm going to take you through the commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're finishing up with Todd in California, and we're talking about the jobs. They are just not out there. And we're being lied to. We are the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth. It's even worse than under the Soviet Union.
I would agree with you 100%. You know, Mike, you have a very educated audience.
Yes.
And quite sometimes I'm very surprised your account is so low on YouTube, but I think that's for a reason, because of the CEO of YouTube is part of the Matrix 5 man in the middle. She's part of that group. You can look that up, Matrix 5 man in the middle. And I'm with you. When I wanted to put this thought to you about what I said earlier about the military-industrial complex, that's where the jobs are. I met a man about a month and a half ago who began a discussion. He said, unfortunately, where most of the work is in California is incarceration work.
Yes.
Sad if your whole state is built on incarceration. And if you look at the backdoor deals with Pelosi, Waxman, Feinstein, Boxer, Brown, Fan, the governor that wrote the vaccine bill, which is highly illegal, super illegal. Very surprised that it even got a pass. And you take a conundrum of other political critters, Congress critters. You have the conglomerate that is destroying California from north to south. And it's like nobody here has a say-so on any particular political thing, including, let me just say this, many people in California have been hit by drunk drivers.
Yes.
By illegals. I'm going to tell you this, both of my cars 3.5 weeks ago were wiped out in a single moment by a truck. And the guy was going to run, and I told him, you run, and I'm going to tackle you and take you to the ground, because I've been doing MMA for about 30-plus years. I'm not afraid of people. And then he pulled up his phone, and he said, don't call the cops. I said, are you kidding me? The street is looking pretty violent here. You know, I see 4 cars destroyed. What do you see? And he turned around and looked, and I just said, that's right. That's exactly right. And you're not going anywhere. You're going to face the music like a man, and you're going to take it. And I wish to God our legal system worked that way. If it did, there wouldn't be this 3-tiered type of system where you have one set of rules for the politicals, people, the political hacks, the Congress critters. The second one would be their law enforcement that carry out their memes or whatever they want. I mean, look at the people that are swatted falsely, and they get their house raided by the SWAT team. And then you have the law for us, the taxpayers, and that is the legal system. It is a triple layer legal system.
Yes, it is. It is. Todd, I got to let you go. We're at the end of the show. For those of you who want to tune in about 3 hours, SpaceX is going to launch the Starlink mission. They're going to have a live video feed from their website. I wish them a lot of luck. This is going to be a space-based internet. We talked about it yesterday. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with everybody that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. They need it. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We need it. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.